Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Thunderbolt. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of the ship's engines. Jake had been staring at the same star charts for the past hour, planning their next patrol route through the outer systems. The silence broke when Lieutenant Danny Clark turned from his communication station. His face was pale and serious. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system. It's coming in on all emergency channels." Jake straightened in his chair. "Put it through, Danny." The speakers crackled to life. A strange voice spoke in broken Universal Standard, the language most species used for communication. "This is Captain Zethkai of the civilian ship New Hope. We carry 50,000 refugees from the Zaltharian homeworld. Our engines are failing, and we are being hunted by Krex raiders. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help." The message repeated 3 times before cutting to static. Jake looked around his bridge. Every officer was watching him, waiting for orders. Commander Lisa Brady, his second-in-command, walked over to his chair. "Sir, I'm already checking the records. That signal has been broadcasting for 6 hours. The Altarian Commonwealth received it first, then the Vegan Trade Federation, and even the Centauri Republic." Jake frowned. "Any of them respond?" Lisa shook her head. "No, sir. All of them declined to help. The system is in disputed space, and it's deep in what they call the death zone. The radiation from the pulsar makes it too dangerous for most species to operate there." Jake stood up and walked to the main display screen. The Kepler system showed as a red dot on the star map. It was far from any major shipping lanes and surrounded by the twisted space that pulsars created. Most alien species avoided the area completely. "How many people did you say were on that ship?" Jake asked. 50,000, sir. All civilians. Families, children, elderly. They're running from the war on their homeworld." Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. 50,000 innocent people, and nobody would help them because it was too dangerous. He turned to Danny. "Get me Admiral Patterson on the quantum communicator. Priority 1. While Danny worked to establish the connection, Jake studied the tactical display. The Kepler system was indeed in a bad location. It sat right at the border between 3 different territories, making it a legal nightmare. But more importantly, it was surrounded by the kind of space that killed most alien ships. The main screen flickered and showed the weathered face of Admiral Roy Patterson. The old man looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Jake, I assume this is about the distress call from Kepler 442? "Yes, sir." "Have you seen the situation reports?" Patterson nodded grimly. "I have. 50,000 refugees being hunted by Krex raiders, and every major power in the galaxy has decided it's not there. Problem." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "What are your orders, sir?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, Jake could see the busy bridge of the fleet flagship. Other officers were moving around, checking displays and preparing reports. Patterson finally spoke. "Jake, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you prepared to take your ship and crew into a system that every other species considers a death trap, to save people you've never met, from a species that isn't even allied with us?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." Patterson smiled for the first time in the conversation. "I hoped you'd say that, because I'm ordering the entire Third Fleet to respond. We're going to save those refugees, Jake. All of them." The bridge erupted in quiet activity as officers began preparing for the mission. Lisa walked back to Jake's side. "Sir, I've got the tactical breakdown. The Krex usually hunt in packs of 8 to 12 ships. They're bigger than us and have more firepower." Jake nodded. "How many ships do we have available?" 12, sir. The Thunderbolt, the Valkyrie, the Nightingale, the Defender, and 8 smaller vessels. Captain Neil Roberts is commanding the Valkyrie, and Dr. Amy Foster is aboard. As our chief science officer, Jake looked at the numbers. 12 human ships against potentially 12 or more Krex raiders, in a system that was dangerous even without enemies shooting at them. Any sane commander would call it suicide. Danny, send a message to all ships in the fleet. Tell them we're going to Kepler 442 to answer a distress call. Anyone who wants to transfer to another assignment can do so with no questions asked. Danny worked at his console for several minutes, then looked up. Message sent, sir. I'm getting responses now. Jake waited, wondering how many of his people would decide this mission was too dangerous. The responses came in quickly. The Valkyrie reported ready for action. The Nightingale medical ship confirmed they were prepared for mass casualties. The Defender and all the smaller ships reported the same thing. Sir, Danny said with a grin, not a single person requested a transfer. Everyone wants to go. Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew and his species. This was what made humans different from the other races in the galaxy. When someone needed help, humans didn't calculate the odds or worry about the politics. They just acted. Lisa, get me our best intelligence on the Kepler system. I want to know everything about that pulsar and how it affects ship operations. If we're going into the death zone, we need every advantage we can get. Lisa nodded and hurried to her station. Jake turned back to the communication screen where Admiral Patterson was still waiting. Sir, the fleet is ready. When do we leave? Patterson's expression was grim but determined. Immediately, Jake. Those refugees don't have much time left. The Krex are playing with them now, but they won't wait forever. Jake felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. In a few hours, he would be leading 12 ships and over 3,000 human lives into one of the most dangerous regions of space. They were going to face an enemy that outnumbered them, in a system that could kill them even if they won the battle, but 50,000 innocent people were counting on them. Understood, sir. The Third Fleet will answer the call. Patterson nodded. Good hunting, Jake. And remember, we don't abandon anyone. That's not who we are. A connection ended, and Jake turned to face his bridge crew. Every officer was watching him, waiting for the order that would send them into the unknown. Jake took a deep breath and spoke clearly. All stations, prepare for immediate departure. Set course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum speed. We have refugees to save. The bridge came alive with activity as the crew prepared the ship for hyperspace jump. Jake settled back into his command chair and stared at the tactical display. Somewhere out there, 50,000 people were running for their lives, and nobody in the galaxy cared enough to help them. Nobody except the humans. The 12 ships of the Third Fleet moved through hyperspace like ghosts in the night. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Thunderbolt, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace flow past the main view screen. In 2 hours, they would drop back into normal space and face whatever was waiting for them in the Kepler system. Commander Lisa Brady walked up to him with a datapad in her hands. Sir, I've got the latest intelligence reports from our forward scouts. The situation is worse than we thought. Jake took the pad and read the information. His face grew darker with each line. 15 Krex ships now? Yes, sir. They started with 8, but more have joined the hunt. They're treating this like a sport, taking turns to attack the refugee ship. They're keeping it alive on purpose, making it suffer. Jake felt sick. The Krex were known for their cruelty, but this was beyond anything he had seen before. What about the refugee ship itself? Lisa pulled up another report. The New Hope is barely holding together. They've lost main power twice in the last hour. Their life support systems are failing, and they have no weapons to defend themselves. Jake handed the pad back and activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Conference call in 10 minutes. I want all commanding officers online. 10 minutes later, the main screen showed the faces of all 12 ship commanders. Captain Neil Roberts of the UES Valkyrie looked grim. Dr. Amy Foster, the fleet's chief science officer, was aboard the research vessel Stormbreaker. The medical ship Nightingale was commanded by Dr. Helen Martinez, who had her entire hospital staff preparing for casualties. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake began, we're about to enter one of the most dangerous systems in known space to face an enemy that outnumbers us. I want everyone to understand what we're walking into. Dr. Foster spoke first. Captain, I've been studying the Kepler system for the past 6 hours. The pulsar creates massive radiation storms that happen every 43 minutes. Most alien species can't survive in that environment, but humans can handle it with proper shielding. Captain Roberts leaned forward. What about the Kreks? How do they operate in there? They use heavy radiation shielding, but it slows them down and reduces their sensor range. The radiation also interferes with their targeting systems. That might be our only advantage. Jake nodded. What else do we know about the system? There's a large asteroid field in the outer system, Dr. Foster continued. It's full of rare minerals that human mining companies have been working for years. We know the navigation routes better than anyone else. Lieutenant Commander Pete Collins, the fleet's best pilot, spoke up from his fighter squadron. Sir, I'd like to volunteer for a scouting mission. My stealth fighters can get close to the Kreks fleet and gather intelligence without being detected. Jake considered the request. Pete was brave, but sending him ahead of the main fleet was dangerous. How many fighters do you have? 12, sir. 1 from each ship. We can launch as soon as we drop out of hyperspace. Dr. Martinez, the chief medical officer, added her concerns. Captain, I need to warn you about something. The Zeltharians are not built like humans. If their ship has been damaged as badly as the reports suggest, they might not survive the radiation exposure much longer. Jake felt the weight of time pressing down on him. Every minute they spent in hyperspace was another minute those refugees were suffering. How long do they have? Maybe 6 hours, sir. After that, the radiation will start killing them even if they're inside their ship. The conference call was quiet for a moment. Everyone understood what this meant. They had to win quickly, or the people they were trying to save would die anyway. Captain Roberts broke the silence. Jake, I've been thinking about our tactical situation. 15 Krek ships is a lot, but they're not expecting us. They think no one will come to help. That's true, Jake agreed. But once we arrive, they'll call for more reinforcements. We need to be ready for that. Dr. Foster pulled up a holographic display of the Kepler system. The pulsar's radiation comes in waves. If we time our attack correctly, we can use the radiation storms to mask our approach. The Kreks won't see us coming until it's too late. Jake studied the display. The plan was risky, but it might work. Pete, how long do you need to gather intelligence on the Kreks' positions? Give me 30 minutes after we arrive, sir. I can map their entire fleet and find their weak points. Jake made his decision. Here's what we're going to do. Pete's fighters will scout ahead and gather intelligence. The rest of us will position ourselves in the asteroid field and wait for the next radiation storm. When it hits, we'll use it as cover to get close to the Kreks fleet. Commander Brady looked worried. Sir, what if they detect us before we're in position? Then we fight them head on, Jake said simply. But I'd rather have surprise on our side. The conference call ended, and Jake returned to his command chair. Around him, his crew was making final preparations for combat. The weapons officer was checking the plasma cannons. The engineering team was reinforcing the radiation shielding. The medical bay was being prepared for wounded. Danny Clark turned from his communication station. "Sir, we're getting another transmission from the refugee ship. It's weak, but I can. Clean it up." The speakers crackled, and Captain Zethkai's voice came through. He sounded exhausted and desperate. "This is the New Hope. We are losing life support on Becks 7 through 12. Many of our people are sick from radiation poisoning. The Krek ships are moving closer. I don't think we can survive much longer." Jake felt anger building in his chest. He activated the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In 1 hour, we will arrive at the Kepler system. There are 50,000 innocent people there who need our help. They've been abandoned by everyone else in the galaxy, but we're going to save them." He paused, looking around his bridge at the faces of his crew. "I won't lie to you. This is going to be dangerous. We're outnumbered, and we're going into a system that most species consider a death trap. But those refugees are counting on us. We're the only ones who came when they called for help." The ship's intercom carried his voice to every deck. "We are human. We don't abandon people who need help. We don't calculate the odds when lives are at stake. We don't walk away from those who are suffering. Today, we're going to show the galaxy what humanity stands for." The crew responded with determination. Jake could feel it in the air, the quiet resolve that came over humans when they were faced with impossible odds. It was the same feeling that had driven their species to explore dangerous worlds, to push into unknown space, to take risks that other species would never consider. The hyperspace alarm sounded, warning that they were approaching their destination. Jake settled into his command chair and activated the tactical display. In a few minutes, they would face the enemy. "All stations, prepare for hyperspace exit. Weapons to stand by. Shields at maximum. And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves today. We're fighting for 50,000 people who have nowhere else to turn." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. The main screen showed the Kepler system in all its deadly beauty. The pulsar spun in the center, sending out waves of radiation that would kill most alien species in minutes. In the distance, Jake could see the refugee ship limping through space while Krek's warships circled it like sharks. "Pete, launch your fighters. Get me that intelligence." "Yes, sir." Fighters away. Jake watched the small craft disappear into the darkness. Soon, they would know exactly what they were facing. But regardless of the odds, the Third Fleet would do what humans always did when innocent people were in danger. They would fight. The Kepler system was a nightmare of twisted space and deadly radiation. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Thunderbolt, watching the tactical display as Pete Collins and his fighter squadron gathered intelligence on the enemy fleet. The refugee ship New Hope limped through the outer system, leaving a trail of debris and atmosphere behind it. "Sir?" Danny Clark called from his station. "I'm picking up massive radiation levels from the pulsar. The next storm will hit in 20 minutes. Jake nodded and opened a channel to the fighter squadron. "Pete, what do you see out there?" Pete's voice crackled through the speakers. "It's worse than we thought, Captain. 15 Krek's warships, just like the report said. They're spread out in a hunting formation around the refugee ship. The biggest. One is their flagship, about twice the size of the Thunderbolt." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Any sign they'd detected us?" "No, sir. They're too busy playing with their prey. The refugees are barely alive, Captain. I can see hull breaches all over their ship. They're venting atmosphere in at least 6 places." "Commander." Lisa Brady walked to Jake's side. "Sir, if we're going to save those people, we need to move now. Another hour, and there won't be anyone left to save." Jake made his decision. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. We're going in. Use the asteroid field for cover and wait for my signal. When the radiation storm hits, we attack. The human fleet moved through the asteroid field like hunting wolves. The U's Valkyrie, commanded by Captain Neil Roberts, took position on the left flank. The medical ship Nightingale, under Dr. Helen Martinez, stayed in the rear, ready to receive casualties. The smaller ships spread out to create a wide attack formation. Dr. Amy Foster's voice came through the communication system. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the pulsar. The radiation storm will be stronger than usual this time." Jake smiled grimly. "Good. The stronger the better. It'll blind the Krex sensors completely." On the main screen, the Krex fleet continued its cruel game. The largest ship, the flagship, fired a single plasma bolt that tore through the refugee ship's hull. Jake could see the atmosphere rushing out into space, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of the people inside. "Sir," Pete reported, "the Krex commander is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's calling himself War Leader Geshtar. He's laughing about how long he can keep the refugees alive." Jake felt a cold rage building in his chest. The Krex were known for their cruelty, but this was beyond evil. They were torturing 50,000 innocent people for their own amusement. The radiation storm hit like a hammer. The main screen flickered as the pulsar's energy washed over them. Jake could hear the ship's hull groaning under the strain, but the human radiation shielding held. Most alien species would have been killed instantly by this level of radiation, but humans had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. "Now," Jake shouted, "all ships attack!" The human fleet burst from the asteroid field like avenging angels. The UE's Thunderbolt led the charge, its plasma cannons already firing. The Krex fleet was caught completely off guard. Their sensors were blinded by the radiation, and they couldn't see the human ships until it was too late. The first salvo caught 3 Krex ships by surprise. The human weapons were smaller than the Krex plasma cannons, but they were more accurate. The Thunderbolt's guns tore through the shields of the nearest enemy ship, sending it spinning out of control. Direct hit. The weapons officer shouted, "Enemy ship is losing power." But the Krex recovered quickly. War Leader Geshtar's voice boomed across all frequencies. "Humans, you dare to interfere with our hunt? You will pay for this insult." The Krex flagship turned toward the human fleet, its massive guns charging for a killing blow. Jake saw the energy building up in the alien weapons and knew they had seconds to act. "Lisa, evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter formation." The human fleet broke apart like a school of fish, each ship going in a different direction. The Krex flagship fired, its plasma cannon sending a bolt of energy that could have destroyed a city. But the bolt passed harmlessly through empty space where the Thunderbolt had been a moment before. Captain Roberts and the UE Valkyrie attacked from the left, using the ship's superior speed to stay ahead of the Krex guns. The smaller human ships darted between the larger vessels, their weapons chipping away at enemy shields and armor. But the Krex had numbers on their side. For every hit the humans scored, the aliens returned fire with weapons that could cut a human ship in half. The U's Defender, commanded by Captain Tony Walker, took a direct hit from a Krex plasma cannon. The ship's shields flared and failed, leaving it defenseless. "Defender is losing power." Danny reported. "They're requesting immediate assistance." Jake wanted to help, but he couldn't break off from his own battle. The Krex flagship was bearing down on them, its guns charging for another shot. "Tony, can you get your ship to the asteroid field?" Captain Walker's voice came through the speakers, strained but determined. "We're trying, Jake, but our engines are damaged. We're not going to make it." Jake made a split-second decision. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. We need to take out their commander." The human fleet turned toward the massive Krex ship, like a pack of wolves attacking a bear. Their combined firepower hammered against the alien vessel's shields, but the flagship was too heavily armored. The human weapons barely scratched its hull. War leader Gishtar laughed over the communication channels. Is this the best the famous Deathworld warriors can do? You are weak. You are nothing. The Krek's commander was right about one thing. The human fleet was outgunned and outnumbered. But Jake knew something that Geshtar didn't understand. Humans didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought for something much more powerful. Dr. Foster, Jake called. What's the status on the refugee ship? It's still alive, Captain, but barely. I'm reading massive hull breaches and failing life support. They have maybe 30 minutes before the radiation kills everyone aboard. Jake looked at the tactical display. The battle was going badly for the humans. They had damaged several Krek ships, but they hadn't destroyed any of them. Meanwhile, the Defender was dead in space, and the other human ships were taking heavy damage, but the refugee ship was still alive. 50,000 people were still breathing, still hoping that someone would save them. That was what mattered. All ships, new plan, were going to get between the Kreks and the refugees, form a defensive line and hold it at all costs. The human fleet moved to shield the refugee ship from further attack. The U.E.'s Thunderbolt, the U.E.'s Valkyrie, and the other vessels formed a wall of metal and courage between the hunters and their prey. War leader Geshtar saw what they were doing and howled with rage. You think you can protect them? You think your pathetic ships can stop us? We will destroy you all. The Krek's fleet charged forward, all 15 ships firing at once. The space around the human fleet lit up with plasma fire and explosions. The U.E.'s Nightingale, the medical ship, took a glancing blow that sent it spinning. 2 of the smaller ships were hit directly, their shields failing under the massive firepower. But the human line held. Jake gripped his command chair as the Thunderbolt shook under enemy fire. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep the ship operational. The lights flickered, and he could smell smoke from overloaded circuits. Shields at 30%. Lisa reported. We can't take much more of this. Jake looked at the refugee ship on the main screen. It was so close now, close enough to see the faces of the people inside through the damaged hull. Men, women, children, all looking up at the human ships with hope in their eyes. We hold the line, Jake said quietly. No matter what happens, we hold the line. The battle raged around them, but Jake felt a strange calm. This was what humans did. When the universe was cruel and heartless, when innocent people suffered and no one else cared, humans stood up and fought. They didn't fight because they could win. They fought because it was right. The next wave of Krek's fire was coming, and Jake knew it might be the last thing he ever saw. But somewhere behind them, 50,000 people were still alive because humans had answered their call for help. That was enough. The human fleet was dying. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display as his ships fought desperately against overwhelming odds. The U's Defender was completely dead in space, its crew evacuated to other vessels. The U.E.'s Nightingale had taken critical damage and was slowly falling behind the battle line. 3 of the smaller ships were running on backup power, their weapons barely functioning, but they were still fighting. Sir, Benny Clark called from his station. I'm getting a priority transmission from the refugee ship. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Jake activated the communication channel. Captain Zethkai's voice came through, weak and filled with pain. Human ships, this is the new hope. Our hull is failing. We have maybe 20 minutes before complete. Structural collapse. Many of our people are already dead from radiation exposure. Jake felt the weight of 50,000 lives pressing down on him. Zethkai, We're doing everything we can. Dr. Martinez is preparing the medical ships for mass evacuation. I understand, Captain Morrison, but I must tell you something. My people ... We have heard stories about humans. We were told you were monsters, killers from a death world. But you came when no one else would. You are fighting for us when your own lives are in danger. We will remember this. The transmission cut out as another Krex plasma bolt tore through the refugee ship's hull. Jake could see the atmosphere rushing out into space, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Commander Lisa Brady walked to his side, her face grim. Sir, we're not going to be able to hold this position much longer. The Krex have us outnumbered 3-1, and they're bringing in reinforcements. Jake looked at the tactical display. Lisa was right. The Krex fleet had grown to 18 ships, with more arriving every hour. War leader Geshtar was methodically destroying the human fleet, one ship at a time. Captain, Pete Collins' voice came through the speakers. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Krex flagship. They're charging their main guns for a final strike. Jake knew what that meant. The Krex commander was tired of playing games. He was going to destroy the refugee ship with one massive blast, and there was nothing the human fleet could do to stop it. Unless ... double quotes. Pete, how many fighters do you have left? 8, sir. We've lost 4 to enemy fire. Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Pete, I need you to make a run on the Krex flagship. Target their main guns and keep them from firing on the refugee ship. There was a long pause. Pete knew what Jake was asking. The Krex flagship was surrounded by smaller ships, all bristling with weapons. Any fighter that got close would be destroyed. In seconds. Understood, sir. We'll buy you as much time as we can. Jake watched on the main screen as 8 small human fighters broke away from the fleet and headed straight for the Krex flagship. They were tiny compared to the massive alien ship, like insects attacking a giant. But they were fast and hard to hit. The Krex point defense systems opened fire, filling space with deadly energy beams. 3 fighters died in the first few seconds, their pilots never even knowing what hit them. But the remaining 5 pressed on, dodging and weaving through the storm of fire. Pete's fighter was in the lead, its weapons blazing as it approached. The flagship's main guns. Jake could hear him over the radio, calm and focused despite the chaos around him. Target acquired. Beginning attack run. The human fighters dove toward the Krex flagship like eagles attacking a bear. Their small weapons weren't powerful enough to seriously damage the massive ship, but they didn't need to destroy it. They just needed to disrupt the main guns long enough for the evacuation to continue. 2 more fighters died in the assault, their pilots giving their lives to save people they had never met. But Pete and the remaining 2 fighters reached their target. Their weapons tore into the flagship's gun emplacements, sending sparks and debris flying into space. War leader Geshtar's voice boomed across all frequencies. Insects! You think your pathetic attack can stop us? You will die for this insult. The Krex flagship turned its full attention to the human fighters. Every gun on the ship opened fire, creating a wall of death that no pilot could survive. Jake watched in horror as the last 2 fighters were destroyed, their pilots dying in flashes of light. Only Pete was left, his fighter damaged and smoking. Jake could see him on the tactical display, limping toward the flagship's command bridge. The Krex guns were tracking him, seconds away from ending his life. Pete, get out of there, Jake shouted. You've done enough. But Pete's voice was calm and determined. No, sir. I can see the bridge. I can end this. Jake realized what Pete was going to do. The young pilot was going to ram his fighter into the flagship's command center, taking out war leader Geshtar and throwing the entire Krex fleet into chaos. Pete, no. There has to be another way. There isn't time, sir. Take care of those refugees. Make sure they know that humans keep their promises. Pete's fighter accelerated toward the Krex flagship, its engines glowing white-hot. The alien ships. Guns fired desperately, but Pete was too close and moving too fast. His fighter punched through the flagship's shields and armor, like a bullet through paper. The explosion lit up the entire system. The Krex flagship's command section disappeared in a ball of fire, taking war leader Geshtar and his senior officers with it. The massive ship began to drift, its crew leaderless and confused. Jake felt tears in his eyes as he watched the tactical display. Pete Collins had been one of the best pilots in the fleet, a young man with his whole life ahead of him. Now he was gone, sacrificed to save people he had never met. But his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Krex fleet was in chaos, their ships milling around without orders. Some of them were trying to retreat, while others continued to attack without coordination. All ships, Jake said, his voice heavy with grief and determination. Pete bought us time. Don't waste it. Continue the evacuation. Get those people to safety. Dr. Helen Martinez's voice came through the speakers. Captain, we're receiving refugees. Now, the Nightingale is taking on as many as we can handle. But there are so many of them, and they're in bad shape. Jake looked at the refugee ship on the main screen. It was breaking apart, huge sections of hull drifting away into space. But the human medical teams were working frantically to save as many people as possible. How many have we evacuated so far? About 20,000, sir. But the ship is collapsing faster than we can work. We need more time. Jake turned to Danny. Send a message to all human ships in the sector. Tell them we need immediate assistance. For refugee evacuation. Emergency priority. Sir, the nearest human ships are 6 hours away. We don't have 6 hours. Jake felt the weight of command crushing down on him. 20,000 people saved, but 30,000 still trapped on a dying ship. The Krex fleet was reorganizing, and soon they would resume their attack. Then the miracle happened. Sir, Danny shouted, I'm picking up hyperspace signatures. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Jake spun around to look at the tactical display. 8 new ships had appeared on the edge of the system, their weapons already charging. The lead ship was the UES Stormbreaker, commanded by Captain Grace Williams. Jake, this is Grace. Sorry we're late to the party. We got your message and came as fast as we could. Jake felt hope surge through him. The reinforcements had arrived just in time. Grace, we need immediate evacuation support. There are 30,000 refugees still trapped on that ship. Already on it, Jake. We brought hospital ships and transports. We'll get them all out. The human reinforcements tore into the confused Krex fleet like wolves among sheep. Without war leader Geshtar to coordinate them, the alien ships were fighting as individuals rather than a unified force. Captain Williams and her ships cut through them systematically, destroying or driving off the raiders. Jake watched as the evacuation continued. Human medical teams worked around the clock, carrying alien children to safety, treating radiation sickness, and giving hope to people who had given up on life. The refugee ship New Hope finally broke apart completely, its hull splitting in two. But by then, every single person aboard had been evacuated to human ships. All 50,000 refugees were safe. Jake slumped in his command chair, exhausted by the battle and the emotional toll of command. They had won, but the price had been high. Pete Collins and 11 other pilots had died. The U's Defender would never fight again. Dozens of other crew members had been wounded, but 50,000 innocent people were alive because humans had answered their call for help. Sir, Danny said quietly, I'm getting a message from the refugee fleet. Captain Zethkai wants to thank you personally. Jake activated the communication channel. The alien captain's face appeared on the screen, his features strange, but his eyes filled with gratitude. Captain Morrison, I do not have words in your language to express what my people feel. You came when no one else would. You fought when victory seemed impossible. You saved us all. Jake nodded, too tired to speak. We will remember this, Captain. We will tell our children and their children about the day the humans came to save us. We will remember that when the universe was cruel and heartless, there were still those who cared about strangers. The transmission ended, and Jake sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his crew was beginning the long process of damage assessment and casualty reports. The battle was over, but the work was just *. 6 months had passed since the battle. At Kepler 442, Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the orbital station above New Haven, watching as the last of the Zalfarian refugee ships landed on the planet below. The world had been chosen specifically for the refugees, a place where they could build new lives far from the war that had destroyed their homeworld. Commander Lisa Brady joined him at the large window. The colony ships report successful landing. Sir, all 50,000 refugees are now safely on the surface. Jake nodded, watching the ships disappear into the planet's atmosphere. It had taken months to find a suitable world for the Zalfarians, and even longer to prepare it for habitation. But humanity had kept its promise. Every single refugee who had been saved from the Krex raiders now had a new home. Any word from Captain Zethkai? Jake asked. He sent a message this morning. The first settlement is already under construction. They're calling it New Hope, after their ship. Jake smiled sadly. The original New Hope had been completely destroyed in the battle, broken apart by Krex weapons and the stress of repeated attacks. But the name would live on, a reminder of the day when strangers had risked everything to save them. Danny Clark approached from the communication station. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Patterson. Jake and Lisa walked to the communication center. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Admiral Roy Patterson. But the old man looked tired, older than his years. Jake, Lisa, congratulations on a successful mission. The refugee settlement is proceeding exactly as planned. Thank you, sir. The Zalfarians have been working hard to build their new lives. They're remarkably resilient people. Patterson nodded. That's not the only reason I'm calling. Jake, you need to know that the battle at Kepler 442 has had consequences throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council is not pleased with humanity's actions. Jake felt a familiar anger building in his chest. What's their complaint this time, sir? They're saying that humanity acted recklessly, that we violated the territorial sovereignty of 3 different species by entering the Kepler system. They're also claiming that our attack on the Krex fleet was an act of unprovoked aggression. Lisa stepped forward. Unprovoked? They were hunting defenseless civilians. I know, Lisa, but the Council doesn't see it that way. They're saying that the Krex had a legal right to be in that system, and that we had no authority to interfere. Jake shook his head in disgust. So saving 50,000 innocent people was wrong because we didn't have the proper paperwork? According to the Council, yes. They've filed a formal complaint with the human government. There's talk of economic sanctions, maybe even expulsion from the Galactic Trade Alliance. Jake felt sick. The same governments that had refused to help. The refugees were now punishing humanity for doing what they wouldn't do. Sir, what's the official response from Earth? Patterson smiled for the first time in the conversation. President Carter told them, and I quote, "Humanity will continue to answer distress calls from anyone who needs help, regardless of political considerations. If the Council has a problem with that, they can go to hell." Jake laughed despite himself. President Carter had never been known for diplomatic language, but he had always supported his military commanders. There's more, Jake. The Altarian Commonwealth sent a private message thanking us for preventing a massacre. The Vegan Trade Federation offered to reimburse us for the rescue costs. And the Centauri Republic has quietly asked if we would be willing to respond to future distress calls in their territory. Publicly they condemn us, but privately they're grateful, Lisa observed. Exactly. They know we did the right thing, but they can't admit it publicly without losing face. Jake thought about the political implications. Humanity was already considered the outsiders in galactic politics, the young species that didn't understand how things were supposed to work. This incident would only reinforce that reputation. Admiral, do you think we made the right choice? Patterson's expression grew serious. Jake, 12 of our people died in that battle. 12 families lost loved ones. If you're asking me whether those lives were worth 50,000 alien refugees, that's not a question I can answer for you. Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Pete Collins, the young pilot who had given his life to destroy the Krek's flagship. He thought about the other crew members who had died in the battle and their families who still grieved for them. Sir, I've been thinking about that question for 6 months, and I keep coming back to the same answer. We're human. We don't calculate the value of lives based on species or politics. When someone needs help, we help them. That's who we are. Patterson nodded approvingly. That's the answer I was hoping for, Jake, because I have another mission for you. The screen flickered, and a star map appeared. A red dot blinked in the outer rim territories, far from any major shipping lanes. 3 days ago, we received another distress call. A civilian transport carrying 2,000 passengers has suffered engine failure in the Vega 7 system. They're drifting toward a black hole, and they have maybe a week before they cross the event horizon. Jake studied the map. The Vega 7 system was even more dangerous than Kepler 442, filled with gravitational anomalies and deadly radiation. Let me guess, no one else is willing to respond? The vegans claim it's too dangerous. The Altarians say it's outside their jurisdiction. The Centauri Republic is studying the situation. Meanwhile, 2,000 people are going to die if someone doesn't help them. Jake looked at Lisa, then back at the Admiral. What are your orders, sir? The same as always, Jake. We don't abandon anyone. The Third Fleet has been rebuilt and reinforced. You have 18 ships now, including some of our newest vessels. Take them to Vega 7 and bring those people home. Jake felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. Another impossible mission, another chance for his people to die saving strangers, but also another chance to prove that humanity was different from the other species in the galaxy. Understood, sir. When do we leave? Immediately. Jake, I want you to know something. The battle at Kepler 442 has become required study at every military academy in human space. Your tactical innovations, the use of radiation storms as cover, the sacrifice of Lieutenant Commander Collins, it's all being studied and analyzed. Jake felt a surge of pride. Pete's sacrifice would be remembered, studied by future generations of officers who might face similar situations. There's something else, Patterson continued. The Zelfarian refugees have asked to contribute to the mission. They want to send one of their ships with you as a gesture of gratitude. Sir, that's not necessary. They don't owe us anything. They disagree, Jake. Captain Zethkai specifically requested to accompany the mission. He says his people want to help save others the way they were saved. Jake thought about that. The idea of former refugees volunteering to help rescue other strangers was somehow perfect. It proved that compassion was contagious, that helping others inspired them to help in turn. Tell Captain Zethkai that we'd be honored to have his ship join the mission. Patterson smiled. I thought you'd say that. Jake, I want you to understand what you've started. The battle at Kepler 442 wasn't just about saving refugees. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. Other species are starting to call us when they have problems they can't solve. Situations that are too dangerous, too politically complicated, or too morally ambiguous for normal diplomatic channels. They're calling us the crisis responders of the galaxy. Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and burden. Is that what we are, sir? The galaxy's emergency service? It's what we've always been, Jake. We just didn't know it yet. Humans are the species that goes where others won't go, does what others won't do. We're the ones who answer the calls that everyone else ignores. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to Lisa. Well, Commander, ready for another impossible mission? Lisa smiled. Wouldn't miss it, sir. Besides, someone has to show these aliens how it's done. Jake walked back to the observation window and looked down at the planet below. 50,000 Zelfarian refugees were building new lives, starting families, creating art and literature and music. They were alive because humans had decided that saving strangers was worth any risk. In a few hours, the Third Fleet would launch on another rescue mission. They would face impossible odds in a system that could kill them even if they succeeded. Some of his people might not come home, but somewhere in the Vega 7 system, 2,000 people were waiting for help that only humans would provide. They were counting on a species that had learned long ago that the right thing to do was often the hardest thing to do. Jake thought about Pete Collins and the others who had died at Kepler 442. Their sacrifice had meaning because it had inspired others. The Zelfarians wanted to help rescue strangers because strangers had once rescued them. The cycle of compassion continued, spreading throughout the galaxy one rescue at a time. That was humanity's true gift to the universe, not their technology or their military strength, but their stubborn refusal to abandon.